Welcome to The Know, I'm Mica.
And I'm Gus.
One of the biggest stories in the latter half of 2017 was the tug-of-war between gamers' expectations and developers, a tug-of-war which sometimes showed itself in huge subreddit catastrophes, with gamers expressing disappointments on an enormous scale.
Since then, we've had a lot of developers talking about how opening up to fans doesn't always pay off, and now we've got one saying one of the biggest mistakes they ever made was listening to their fans.
Yeah, you out there just shut your mouths, because the game developers will tell you what's fun. Yikes. Joking aside, the issue is obviously much more complicated than that, and these new comments prompt some thoughtful discussion about the balance between listening to gamer feedback and trusting in your own creative choices.
So let's get to the quote, which comes from a new interview with Insomniac Games Chief Brand Officer Ryan Schneider. Schneider spoke at length with GamesIndustry.biz about the studio's recent efforts to revitalize their image, talking about why they're in the middle of a rebrand and how they want to capture the imagination of gamers again with titles like Spider-Man.
It's a nice interview that talks about the studio's history with Ratchet & Clank, plus some about their working relationship with Sony and Marvel. And after all those bits, Schneider went on to talk a little bit about gamers and the community.
And basically said one of the biggest mistakes they made as a company was, well, listening to the fans a bit too much before they made the sequel to the alt-history sci-fi shooter Resistance 2.
Schneider said one of the hardest lessons we learned at Insomniac was the shift between Resistance Fall of Man and Resistance 2. We were relatively inexperienced when it came to interacting with our community at that point in time. Social media and community were still in their relatively early days, and we over-indexed on how much we listened to our fan base versus trusting ourselves.
He went on to say that's something we learned the hard way over the years. Just because you see it online and you see it in the forums, that doesn't necessarily represent the majority viewpoint. And even if it does, you still have to think about your predisposition. You have to challenge and reaffirm your own beliefs about what you're trying to make before you can deliberate and make the final decision.
So it's the fans' fault you made a bad game? Well, okay, before you get the pitchforks out and before you light all those torches, Schneider had a little bit more to say. That it's not so much about the fans as it is trusting your own instincts.
He added, what happens is we deal with this thing called the doubt monster, or what other people call the lizard brain, and we start to enter this phase of defensiveness or self-doubt. And we don't believe in ourselves and the choices we're making, and that causes us to cave in and compromise. When we do that, we stray from our vision and values.
So really, it's less about listening to the fans as much as over-relying on that feedback to guide you in your own game. Translation, it's not you, it's me, which is more of what they're saying and not as bad as it might sound at first.
And you've heard business magnates say this kind of thing in the past, like Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, they say, just stick to your creative guns, as it were.
Exactly.
While some might have a problem with those comments, he raises some good points about allowing the experts to do the stuff we're paying them to do, assuming we buy the game they make in the first place.
However, some fans feel like spending their money gives them a little bit of ownership over the end product and want a say in how things play out, especially when it comes to sequels.
It probably wouldn't surprise you to learn that Insomniac isn't the only developer out there that is pushing back against letting fans dictate all the terms when it comes to making a game. In fact, many developers have been pretty outspoken about this in recent months.
Back in September, industry veteran Charles Randall wrote a series of tweets about why developers often feel like they can't be candid with their players. Usually, the negatives outweigh the positives.
And Blizzard's Jeff Kaplan was similarly honest about his employees' feelings about dealing with the Overwatch community. Often, it's kind of scary because some really bad apples can spoil the entire thing for the team.
Bethesda marketing VP Pete Hines had some similar things to say last September, saying that Bethesda isn't really swayed at all by fan criticism.
Yeah, that made some headlines, and speaking about criticism, Hines said, we're aware of it, but we're not going to let it define what we do. Ultimately, we're going to try to do the things that we think are the best for the games that we're making, because that's honestly all I can really control. He went on to say, the development teams aren't just a vending machine where you press for the soda and they just go back and forth. They want to be able to stretch their legs creatively or try a new idea or do something different and not just follow in the same pattern.
And again, before the pitchforks come out, I see you in the back there with that torch, just put it down. Even legendary video game designer Shigeru Miyamoto at Nintendo feels similarly to the creators we've already mentioned here, because Miyamoto, and really Nintendo as a whole, they don't like to hire gamers.
In an interview with the New York Times, Miyamoto says he prefers to hire designers who aren't super passionate games fans because gamers tend to want to keep recreating the same experiences, while designers are trying to do something new and different. They iterate and make things better.
And for Miyamoto, this is a huge part of what has made Nintendo so successful over the years. While some people might get upset about Nintendo's shtick with its big franchises, they're always looking to reinvent each one with every new entry. Regardless of your particular opinion on it, it's a strategy that has paid big dividends for the company, especially in 2017 with the reinventions of both The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario.
In the end, it's sometimes easy for fans to forget that they don't have any experience in designing a game. Yes, you've played a lot of them, but that doesn't exactly make you an expert, at least not on how to make something fun.
Like, you can eat a lot of cakes, but that doesn't make you a baker.
I drive cars all the time. don't know how to make a car.
Exactly. That being said, it does behoove game developers to actually listen to the people who are, spending their money on their products and want to have even more fun playing them, which is why the good ones know how to do that and follow their vision.
Insomniac Schneider wraps up the interview by saying they found a new way to balance all of that out, making sure they hear the feedback and marry it to what they want to do as creators.
Schneider said, as a studio and a community team, we've done a better job of listening with a little less direct emotional engagement and analyze with a little bit more objectivity. At the same time, we've been doing this almost 25 years, so when you weigh the ability to listen with the confidence to trust your instincts and not being afraid to change course when you need to, but balancing that with confidence and experience, you're more apt to make a better decision or even take a bigger risk.
Sounds like a good compromise.
Yeah, I like it.
Listen, but make sure that you vet the information you're getting.
Exactly.
Yeah, smart. Hey, if it helps make a super awesome Spider-Man game, more power to them.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Insomniac's comments about the balance of fan feedback and creative vision? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on some of the biggest video games of 2018 and little developers' feelings, remember to like this video, and if you're new around here, subscribe to the know. It's a nice interview that talks about the studio's history with Ratchet and Clank, plus about some of the...
And basically said one of the worst mistakes they made as a company was...
Well, okay, before you get the pitchforks out and before you light all those torches, Schneider had a little bit to say.
Yeah, that statement made some headlines. Speaking about criticism, I fucked that up.